Hello, my Italian food fanatics. Today we're going to make spaghetti carbonara, a classic dish, but we're going to make it in a neoclassic way. But before I tell you more about it, please hit the thumbs up button, like, subscribe, share, ring the bell so you get notifications of when I release videos, and also leave a comment down below. All right? This is a neoclassic way of making carbonara by making a zabaione, or what is more classically referred to as a hollandaise. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the eggs, we're going to add a little bit of pasta water in there that's reserved, and we're going to froth that up and sort of cook the eggs and make a base of a hollandaise or a zabaione, and then we're going to add in some guanciale fat, okay? And then the cheese, some pepper, some of the guanciale that we have crisped up is going to go back in. We'll cook the pasta, get that all incorporated in, and then finish with some more pecorino and grana, as well as a little bit of that guanciale fat that's left over, and a little bit of pepper, and also the crisped guanciale as well. So we have a soft guanciale and a crisp guanciale in a very creamy sauce. And there's some science behind everything. We'll discuss that as we go along. So without any further ado, I hope you've hit the thumbs up button. I hope you've liked. I hope you've subscribed. I hope you leave a comment. I hope you share. And now let's get in the kitchen and attack the carbonara. See you in the kitchen. All right, before we continue, I've got to give a shout out to a man by the name of Matthias from a town just north of Frankfurt in Germany. Matthias has told me that he's making carbonara. In fact, he shared these photographs with me. Take a look at this. Oh, wow. Unbelievable. Look at that rigatoni with the guanciale on there. And then we have spaghetti. I believe that's spaghetti, if I'm not mistaken, with the cheese. Look at the presentations. Look at the creaminess. Look how beautiful Matthias has made the carbonara. Absolutely fantastic. Because I told him I was going to make carbonara. If you have a photograph of it, please send it over, because we've been corresponding a little bit on Instagram. And if you have a photograph of one of the dishes that I've made here, please send it over on Instagram. There's a link below, and I'm happy to feature it on my channel. Now, I won't tell you what Matthias's last name is. I'm not going to tell you the town that he comes from. I think that there's some semblance of anonymity that needs to be kept in here. So if I will respect you as well. If you just want me to use your handle or what have you, I'm happy to do that. But please, send your photographs in. Let's share with our community of subscribers. It continues to grow as I continue on this journey. And again, Matthias, super, fantastic. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's show Matthias a little bit of love in the comments down below and tell him how much that we appreciate his hard work. It's not easy to make carbonara. It's perhaps the most complicated of all four of Roman pasta dishes. So let's give him some love. And if you have a picture, send it over on Instagram. I'm happy to feature you and give you a shout out on the channel. So with that said, let's move forward. Thanks again, Matthias. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Dankeschön.
All right, my Italian food fanatics, let's get started. Today, spaghetti carbonara, but in a neoclassic way. First things first, we're going to start out with some very, very high quality spaghetti. If you've watched any of my videos with regard to pasta, you'll know that I really love using this sort of dull pasta that's been extruded through bronze dyes, and it's kind of craggy. It's almost rough to the feel and chalky on the outside, and a very dull sort of a finish on the pasta. That means it's been extruded through bronze dyes very, very slowly, and also dried very, very slowly as well. So a super high quality pasta. In these older Roman or ancient pastas, you want to use as good ingredients as you can possibly get. So along with that, we're going to not break from tradition. Remember, I said this is neoclassic. We're going to use some Pecorino-Romano. We're also going to use some Grana-Padano, which is a cousin of Parmesan. I call it Parmesan light. If you ever taste the two side by side, you'll know what I mean. Of course, we're going to use some guanciale because you cannot make carbonara without guanciale. I don't care what anybody says. The flavor is in the guanciale is different than pancetta, and of course, you never ever want to use bacon. Of course, a feature of carbonara is pepper, and obviously the main ingredient here are eggs. Now, of course, you know, if you've watched any of my videos on omelets or eggs or anything like that, you'll know that the color of the shell is indicative of the breed of the chicken, and the yolks can be manipulated with the chicken's diet. Now, in North America, we don't have the beautiful orangish yolks that you will find in Europe, and especially in Italy, and especially in the north of Italy, in places like Emilia-Romagna. Of course, you can find that in Rome as well. So these are going to be a lighter colored yolk, but they're still eggs, and the color of the yolks doesn't necessarily reflect on their ability to make a carbonara. You can make it with any eggs. These are free range, organic. I try to find the best quality products, as I mentioned earlier. Both the Pecorino and the Grana are direct from Italy as well. Obviously, they're not American substitutes or anything like that. This is an actual from Sardinia. It's a young Pecorino, and of course the Grana is again, like I said, a cousin of Parmigiano Reggiano. So with that said, let's get started with the guanciale. All right, let's get started with our guanciale, and we are going to cut this into slices like this. They're about a half an inch, a quarter of an inch, and then we're going to trim all of this excess off of the sides and then cut them into batons, or what are really referred to as lardons. And then we're going to crisp these up. So there we go. That should be enough for a couple of helpings, and I'll trim these up. Look, it's very simple. Any sort of discoloration or anything that's not the white fat there around the sides has got to go. This is just dried garbage here. Now, I know that this, if you're in North America and if you're buying imported guanciale, this makes the guanciale even more expensive. So if you buy a hunk of guanciale like I have here, it's about 12 ounces, you can get an idea of what working with guanciale and the flavor is all about. All right, and then you can practice without the guanciale, and if you really want to do something special and learn how to do it and really take your time and get the flavor, do it for a special occasion, then it's doable as far as cost wise. It's reasonable if you want to do something like that. But other than that, you're not going to be having this on a regular basis. It's already way too much fat and way too many calories. These dishes are these Roman dishes like even Cacio Pepe or alla Gricia, which is like Cacio Pepe with the addition of guanciale, are very, and especially this one, are very, very high calorie foods. And I believe, and I can't prove it, and it's not quantifiable, that these were meals that were had by people once a day, when back in the day when they just had one meal a day and basically subsisted off of that. It had to be very, very rich. In addition to that, back in those days, people worked very, very hard. They were out in the fields, they were doing manual labor, and so they used up those calories. But today, in our sedentary lifestyle, we are overloaded with calories when we eat dishes like this, and so for that reason, we can't really indulge in them too often. All right, so let me cut these. Let me just show you. We're going to cut into batons, just like this, okay? You don't want them too small, you don't want them too big, because we want them to be crispy on the outside, yet tender on the inside when we crisp them up, and we want them to render their fat. You want to keep this fat. In fact, the fat to lean ratio is important. As much fat you want to keep as possible, but you don't want a discolored fat. So I'll cut these up and we'll come back. All right, I've gone ahead and I have grated the pecorino and also the grana. For a couple of servings, we're going to need 10 grams of pecorino and 15 grams of grana, and that's what I have here. I also have some reserved to finish the dish as well. It's important that this is ground very, very finely, or grated very, very finely, because we want it to melt and we want it to mix. And what we're going to do is we're going to use pasta water, which has a starch. These starches coat the molecules in the cheese and stop them from becoming stringy. All right, we want it to be creamy as opposed to stringy. And one of the ways that we do that is by grating it very, very finely. And the other way is by using a very heavily starched pasta water. Now, I've already made pasta water. Sometimes I keep it, most of the time I keep it on hand if there's any water left over. And this one happens to be unsalted, which is important for this particular dish because you have guanciale, which is salty. You have these cheeses, which are salty. And you don't want to oversalt anything. Plus, we're going to cook the pasta in slightly salted water. And so you have 3 areas which salt is coming into the dish. And you want to temper, for lack of a better word, how much salt goes in. Because if you add now salt to the pasta water at a regular level, you're going to have a pasta that's way, way, way too salty. And especially these days, we don't want that. Hypertension or high blood pressure is a tremendous problem here in North America. And so we have to watch our salt intake for that reason. Anyway, I'll be back with the eggs and everything else. All right, now let's turn our attention to the eggs. We're going to take a separate bowl and we're going to separate the yolks from the whites in the following way. It's the easiest way to do it. First, we crack on a flat surface. We open up the egg and it goes into the hand like this and into the bowl. All right? Let's do that again. It doesn't matter if the yolk breaks in this case because it's going to break anyway. But there we go. Now, you see the difference in color? These are free-range eggs, and they come from various farms, and you can see the difference in that yolk and that yolk. And you know what that is? That's a difference in what the farmer has fed the chickens. A great example right here and right now. So now we're going to take these eggs. I'm going to crack actually one more. And we're going to go onto the stove into a double boiler. There you go. And we're going to make a somewhat like a hollandaise sauce with this. Back in a second. All right, we're here at the stove, and we are going to turn our attention, before we do anything with the eggs, we're going to turn our attention to the guanciale. I'm going to just take the guanciale that we have cut into batons or lardons and place them into a pan. I prefer to use a non-stick pan for this, the same pan that I use to make the omelets that you've probably seen. If you haven't seen my omelets, you should check it out. Learn how to make an omelet in the classical way and never look back again, and you'll be spoiled. Next time you go to an omelet station at some hotel for brunch, you're never going to go again. I can guarantee you that. Once you get the omelet done the right way, there is no substitute. So what's going to happen here is these are going to fry up, and we're not going to add any oil. You see a lot of recipes where people add olive oil to the guanciale to render it down, and that's unnecessary. It's not the classic way. It's a waste of resources, but it's also the most important thing. It's a muddling of flavors. You don't want to take away from the guanciale by adding olive oil, okay? In my opinion, and in the opinion of literally most every Italian chef. It's just not the right thing to do. So I'll come back when this is more crispy and the fat's rendered, and we're going to separate the fat from the crispy lardons. You'll see. Also, one other thing, it's important that if you're doing this for the first time, that maybe you start out not in high heat the way that I have them, okay, but rather on a medium to low heat, and slowly brown the guanciale as opposed to on high heat, where there is a chance that if you step away, that the guanciale is going to burn, and of course we don't want that to happen. We don't want any burned guanciale. So take your time. This is an important step here. It forms part of the essence and the flavor of the dish, especially the crunchiness of the guanciale is a nice counterpoint to the creaminess and the softness of everything else that's in the dish. Of course, the pasta has to be al dente. But anyway, regardless, you want to treat this with the attention and respect that it deserves. Also, it's expensive, especially here in North America. So you should take your time and do it the right way. All right, we'll be back. Now, as the guanciale begins to brown or get crispy, what you may want to do, so that there's more of an even brownness, is to tilt the pan this way and let the guanciale essentially brown in its own rendered fat. All right? This will also help the fat render even more. And we're going to use the fat in the recipe. We're going to separate them out. So here's a kind of a, not a pro tip, I wouldn't say, but a tip on how to do it in such a way that it's that you get the results that you're looking for in a more even and uniform way, so that they're going to brown all around. All right, back when they're fully browned and ready to rock and roll. Okay, we are to the point where the guanciale is brown all the way around and it's crunchy on the outside. And now what I'm going to do in this sieve here, over a bowl, I'm going to drain the guanciale and save the fat. So let me turn the camera back over so you can see. This is what it looks like. So the fat is rendered down at the bottom in this sieve. And look how crunchy and nice and beautiful the guanciale is. It's perfectly crispy on the outside, and it's going to be soft and tender on the inside. So we're going to let this drain until we need to use it. The next step is to go on to the stove with our eggs. We'll be back in a second. All right, before we deal with the eggs, we are going to heat up our pasta water. So we'll leave that there to come to a boil, and then we'll add, it's 4 cups. We're going to add half the amount of salt that I normally add, which is going to be 1 teaspoon. All right, now let's turn our attention to dealing with the eggs and making a zabaione, or essentially what is known classically as a hollandaise. All right, I've created what's known as a bain-marie, or a double boiler here, where we have a pot with a small amount of water that is at a simmer or just under a simmer. What we want is little bubbles to appear. We do not want this water to boil, and that's what we're going to cook the eggs over. So these eggs are now in this bowl, and what we want to do is essentially just continue to mix them like this, and I'm going to add some pasta water into here. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but I make pasta water, and so a little bit of pasta water is going to go in. We're going to thin this out a little bit. I'm going to put in about 3 ounces or so, 1 ounce per egg yolk, a little bit less than that. And we're going to continue to cook these eggs until they become thicker and we see large trails on the bottom of the bowl. And I'll come back when we get to that point. Okay, I just wanted to show you a couple of things. Number one, you can do a figure 8 like this. When you're doing this, you can go back and forth or in a circle. I prefer to go back and forth. That's more of a way that I was taught, or do the figure 8 and really mix this up well. Now, if you see the edges starting to dry up or cook or anything like that, you're going to have to remove this off of
the pot. Don't be afraid to go back and forth if your water is too hot. But if it's just at a bare simmer, then you should not have a problem at all with this. All right? I'm going to continue cooking. We want to continue to cook and beat and make sure that we don't end up with scrambled eggs. That's very important. What this also does is it essentially cooks the eggs, so if you have a fear of any sort of salmonella poisoning or anything like that, you shouldn't, because this will take care of it. It'll also give you a workout on your arm. And what this also helps to do in the long run is make the sauce for the carbonara just absolutely luscious and beautiful. All right? So we'll come back when this is done. Okay, I want to show you something. You see how we're starting to get some trails into the eggs? That means we're approaching the point where they're going to be done. And we can see almost, when we move the whisk back and forth, that you can see the bottom of the bowl. All right? You have to be very careful at this stage. See? It's almost perfect. I'll come back when we're done. All right. You can see that when I beat the eggs now, that you can see the bottom of the bowl. And that signifies that these are ready to go to the next step, which for me, and what I've decided to do with this particular version of carbonara, is add half or most of the guanciale fat into this and create kind of a carbonara hollandaise with this particular version of carbonara. So we'll be back. All right, we're back. Now I've put a towel underneath this bowl to keep it sturdy, because we are going to add some of this guanciale fat into the zabaione. Now you want to start by adding just a couple of drops, just like that, and really whisking the daylights out of it. When you do that, it's going to make emulsifying the rest of the fat a little bit easier. So you add just a little bit in drops like this. Then add a little bit more once it's fully incorporated. Very good. A little bit more. And essentially what you have here is a zabaione, or a hollandaise, made with the fat from the guanciale. How sweet it is. All right, that looks like it's done. That's going to hold. Now what we're going to do is, I've saved a little bit of fat to finish the dish, but now also what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the cheese into here and mix it up, and we're going to thin it out with a little bit of pasta water in the event that we have something a little bit too thick. We'll also be using some of the pasta water from the pasta that we're about to cook in order to thin it out as well, should we need to. All right, so here we are, and let's now add the cheese. I'll be right back. All right, I've placed our cheese into a different bowl, and I'm going to add a little bit of this reserved pasta water here that I have, and we are going to mix this in and create somewhat of a paste here. Now what that does, as you well know, is that coats the molecules on the cheese, so that when the heat hits it in a little while, what we're going to have is creaminess, not stringiness. So now I'm going to add this to the bowl, and we're also going to mix that in really, really well. Let me move the bowl in here so you can see. And now this cheese gets mixed into this. Have no fear, the sauce will not break. You want to get as much of that as possible. It's expensive cheese, at least for Americans it is. For the Italians, it's no problem. They see this stuff every single day. And so we'll mix that in and make it a part of our carbonara. Perfect. All right. And we'll get back to that in a moment. All right. It's now time to add our pasta into the water. Of course, you know that I like to use a very small amount of water so that we have a lot of starch in the water for use to thin out the sauce if necessary, and or to keep for the future. Now I've only added, this is 4 cups of water, I've only added 1 teaspoon of salt already to it. Because as we mentioned earlier, we don't want a lot of salt in the pasta or the pasta water because of the salt in all of the other ingredients. We can always add salt a little bit later. So this has to go until it's literally al dente. All right, there's no room for error here. We're not gonna cook this any further than it's already cooked when it goes into the pot with our sauce. So now, also, if this is the first video of mine that you're watching, you need to stir for the first few seconds until the water basically comes back to a boil and the starches on the surface of the pasta gel, and that way they won't stick together. You don't need copious amounts of water. You don't need rolling boil or anything like that. And also the small amount of water here ensures that the water does get back up to a boil a lot faster, because it takes this, if the same energy is to bring up a regular pot of water back to the boil is a lot more than it will take for this small amount of water to come back to the boil, for lack of a better term. Let's put it that way. It's going to take longer because there's the same amount of energy is going into a larger amount of water, so therefore this comes back to the boil a lot faster. All right? So even though the temperature of the water theoretically has gone down a lot further when we're adding pasta to a small amount of water than if we add pasta to a large amount of water. But the amount of energy that it takes to bring that to the boil is a lot more than right here. And so there's another reasoning for it, and it's a scientific reason as well. So let's turn our attention to the sauce now. We're going to add a little bit of the guanciale and some pepper. All right, while we're waiting for our pasta to be ready, I'm going to take some of this guanciale and I'm going to put it in here. And that's going to make that guanciale somewhat soft. And we're going to keep the other ones in reserve to make it for the crispiness of it. We'll also add a little bit of pepper in here, which is what carbonara is all about as well. So, and we'll give this a little bit of a mix. Now, some of you will say, well, how come it's not as creamy as before? And that's because we added water along with the cheese, and so it's not as creamy, but still, look how beautiful that happens to be. Oh, man. Wait until this is done. It's going to be gorgeous. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our pasta is ready. And so we're going to add it into our carbonara sauce here. I made a little bit of extra sauce because I'm actually going to use this sauce to make some carbonara for some friends that are going to, a couple of buddies that are going to come over a little bit later. Anyway, we're going to mix this up into here. How sweet it is. We're going to add a little bit of extra cheese. In fact, a little bit more. Perfect. Look at how creamy and delicious that happens to be. How sweet it is. And now, let's plate it up. All right, my Italian food fanatics, here we are. It's time to taste the neoclassical carbonara. I can't wait. Now, I added a little bit of extra sauce in there, and the reason why is because by the time we add that additional cheese and the pecorino and the grana mixture there, the pasta tends to seize up. So by adding a little bit of extra sauce, making it slightly runny, if it needs to sit for any amount of time, by the time everything comes together and it cools off just a tiny bit, and we add that additional sprinkling of cheese, it will make the texture and consistency of the dish absolutely perfect. So here we go. Oh, wow. Boy, the Romans, they really knew what they were doing. It's soft. I mean, you saw when I dished it up, it's luscious. It's creamy. The guanciale that I put on top is crunchy. There's just the right amount of pepper in there. Oh, gee, this is good. You got to try this. And it's complicated in the way that it's made because there's a lot of classical techniques that are put in there. But I tell you what, when you do it that way, and the lushness and the creaminess of the sauce, because of the way that we've created an emulsion and added the cheese in there and used a little bit of science so that we get a creaminess rather than a stringiness. I mean, it just brings everything to pass. It makes it all worth it. All right, my mouth is watering for another bite of this stuff. Wow. Now, I will say this, in a restaurant setting, it's going to be a lot easier to accomplish what I've accomplished for you than it's going to be at home, because there's a lot to it. But you have to remember, in a restaurant, all of these things are ready already because it's part of the menu. The chefs or the cooks come in and they know what to do. Everybody has their thing that they're going to do, and they prepare everything every single day. All right, so for you and I, who are going to do this one time, it's going to be more of a pain. All right, you have to take a lot more care. There's a lot more steps. There's a lot more things that you seemingly have to do. It's really not that much more, but because you're just doing them once and not doing them every day, you're not going to have everything ready to go. And so that's what is a little bit more time consuming, but let me tell you that it's worth every extra second of your time to try one of these classic Roman dishes. And so now, by the time this video goes up, I will have all 4 of the classic Roman dishes up: Cacio, Pepe, alla Gricia, alla matriciana, and of course the Carbonara. And this is done in a neoclassical way. It ensures that you're not going to get any sort of scrambled eggs. It ensures that that there will be creaminess and crunchiness. It ensures everything that you need. It shows you how to do everything you need to ensure that you have literally the most perfect carbonara that is possible. All right, so I encourage you, well, first of all, I encourage you to hit the thumbs up button, like, subscribe, leave a comment below, and share with your friends. I'm trying to build a small community of people that appreciates Italian food, not only American Italian, but also authentic classic Italian, like what carbonara is here today, all right? And with a science and new ways of putting the dish together, which makes sense, which make it foolproof, and bring it to the new millennium, essentially, all right? Without sacrificing on the classic, paying attention and paying respect to the classic flavors, textures, and ways in which the dish is made, all right? So, with that said, please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment below. Thank you very, very much for your time, for your watching. I'm going to eat the rest of this, and it's going to be fantastic. Until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.